Key to introduce them.
I'm an addict. My name is Chris. Everyone, thanks for all the love this weekend. Really love it here. Is there anyone hotter than Keith? I'm just questioning. I'm just wondering. I don't know. I know he has a girlfriend. I know about Erica. It's all good. Right? Hello? Anyway. I moved to Pennsylvania when I had, in 2003, so I must have had like 8 years clean. And I started to attend meetings there, and I moved from New York, so I hated it. And when I got there, I started to go to this meeting, and people would come from Allentown to the Poconos to this meeting, and I met the speaker tonight there. So if I had 8 years clean, he may have had a year and a half. And he would bring his car, and he would have bootleg purses and DVDs and all kinds of stuff in the trunk. And he would sell it from the parking lot of the meeting. And I really wanted the stuff, but I was trying, I had 8 years clean. I really did want it. But anyway, we keep coming back, right? And here we are, all of this time later, and he's on the cusp of 22 now, and I have 29. So I've known him for a very long time. And if you don't know this, my dog died. If you know me, you already know that my dog died. And I was really struggling, and my friends were checking in on me. And Bill was at the beach. He loves the beach, right? And he goes to the beach. He goes by himself. He sits in the sand. It's a very meditative experience for him. And he was meditating at the beach, and he said a meditation came to him, and he called me, and he said, I wanted to share. Everyone knew I was all fucked up in the head. And he said, I wanted to share this with you. And he said, I'm letting go. This was his meditation, and he saw it. He said, I'm letting go of what doesn't belong to me, and I'm only holding on to what is rightfully mine. And he said, and that is the love of God. And I took it, and I took it into my heart, and I took it into my spirit, and it became my meditation. And I had it put on these antique plaques, and I sent one to Bill, and I put one on the wall right above my desk so that I could sit with it. So if you look at where we came from to where we are now, and the power, the radical transformation that can come as a result of the transforming relationship that we develop with a benevolent God, keep coming, man, just keep coming. And I have 3 best friends. 2 of them my sponsor, and the 3rd one is Bill. And I'm just going to say one more thing. We have a girl with us, and a year ago, Bill and I go to concerts together. So we fly around and go to shows, right? And Bill flew in to go to Billy Strings with me, right? And so we were going to Billy Strings, and my pop was coming, but my dad got COVID, so he couldn't come. So Bill and I I got him from the plane, we went to a meeting, and we were at the meeting, and there was a girl there, and we had an extra ticket to Billy Strings, and she was new, and she was crazy, right? And like she was like still detoxing, she was like methed out, like whatever, I don't know. I said, do you want to go to a show with us? And she doesn't know who Billy Strings is. She doesn't even know where she is. She doesn't know how she got to Gastonia, North Carolina. Neither do I. But we took her to the show. So Bill and I took this newcomer to a Billy Strings concert. We walked in, and it was like, I was like, oh, I don't think I really thought this through. But I want to say that this coming Wednesday, she celebrates a year clean. 1-year celebration next week. So it's not for the grandiosity or all of the bigness, but it's the another day clean. So with no further ado, I give you one of my favorite all-time human beings on this earth, Bill.
Fucking people here, huh? I'm an addict named Bill. Well, I'm good because I already hugged everybody in the room. So I'm from all over the Northeast, but I've been in the past 21 years in Allentown, Pennsylvania, mostly, or around that area. Little Apple area of Narcotics Anonymous. My home group is on Sunday nights at 7 o'clock. It's called the Karen A Group of Narcotics Anonymous. Some of you may know Karen A was the original printing company that printed the first 2 editions of the basic text. If you look on the spine, you'll see it on there. It's in Center City, Allentown. If you don't know Allentown, maybe you only know what Billy Joel told you in the song. It's the 3rd biggest city in Pennsylvania. I mean, that's a city with Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, so it's a pretty big city, pretty sprawling. And yeah, anyway, so that's my home group, and so here I am now, and I was thinking about, well, what Chris said, I like to go to the beach. I go by myself. I have sometimes friends stop down. I'll rent a condo by myself. I like to go on the beach. I like to meditate. And that particular week, I was having some romantically induced pain. Because I like situations that aren't really for me. Those are the ones I chase. The ones that are for me, I push away, right? Maybe there's a lot of safety in that. But I was feeling that pain, and I knew for sure that it wasn't for me, but I was still, feeling that pain of wanting it, and I was meditating, and that just came to me. Letting go of what is not mine, only holding letting go of what's not mine, only holding what is rightfully mine, the love of God, right? And in the moments that I can remember that the only thing that fills me up or gives me any type of peace is the love of God, I'm doing pretty well. And that's probably 2% of my life. And the other 98% is me looking to fill that space with something that just doesn't work or doesn't last. But the one thing that Narcotics Anonymous gave to me early on is a way of doing it. A way of tapping into that higher power without even knowing that. Because it was through service. So I didn't do service because I'm wanted to do service. I did service because I ran away from home when I was 16 years old. I was born in Trenton, New Jersey, which is a city, boy. It's a tough spot. It's even though it's the capital of New Jersey, it's really like a neighborhood of Philadelphia culturally because it's right across the river. I come up in a family of spare the rod, spoil the child. Anybody ever heard that term before? I come up with people who love me dearly, but the way that they knew how to deal with things was mostly through violence. Crime was not considered to be a terrible thing. Getting caught was considered to be a terrible thing because getting caught meant you were a dummy, right? And like Chris said, up until I had at least 10 years clean, I was very criminal. And I came up with some boundaries for myself that, as long as I wasn't selling or involved with drugs, somehow everything else was on the table. So I was involved in a lot of different things, and the nicest one was the bootlegging stuff, right? But as I progressed through my recovery, and I believed in Narcotics Anonymous very early on, I felt something when I walked in the room. Matter of fact, here's what I want to do. I see that I probably bounce all around, right? But I got a lot of shit to talk about, right? look at the topic. I like the basic text, right? I believe in the basic text, my favorite book. Very simple, very to the point. It affected me in a way that no other piece of literature in the world has ever affected me, right? It's a book that I've been reading for going almost, I have 21 years clean today. God willing, it's the program. It ain't me, I'll tell you that. But God willing, December 21st, I'll have 22 years clean. So my point is that I've been reading this book all that time. And I never failed to find something in there that I never saw was there. When the student's ready, the teacher will appear, right? So anyway, the topic, right? Everything we know, subject to, and they crossed out revision, and they wrote change, right? So let me read this first, so we know what this comes from. We know we've heard a version of this, right? For many, many years, most of us, right? This is from Just for Today, Living the Program. There is a spirit or energy that can be felt in the meetings. This is sometimes the newcomer's first concept of a higher power. Ideas from the past are often incomplete and unsatisfactory. Everything we know is subject to revision, especially what we know about the truth. We reevaluate our old ideas so we become acquainted with the new ideas that lead to a new way of life. We recognize that we are human with a physical, mental, and spiritual sickness. When we accept that our addiction caused our own hell, and that there is a power available to help us, we begin to make progress in solving our problems. So this is really talking about the first and second step in a big way, right? And here's what I want to say about the topic. Maybe you'll change. Maybe you won't. What I know for sure is a lot of things about me have changed. Powerful things. The way I look at the world today is completely different than the way I look at the world and myself 21 years ago. But what I know for sure is without the Narcotics Anonymous program, for me, right, without the 12 steps and meetings that stay within the boundaries of the 12 traditions, it's not possible for me. But with those things, it is possible, but it's not always guaranteed. And what I mean by that, and a 6-step is not an event, right? A 6-step is not, I wrote on my 6-step, all my defects are good, boom, right? And we think that way, right? We think that way because what do? We get here, we just want to be better, right? We want to stop the pain. We want to stop hurting people. We want to, right? We hear other people talking. That's another thing. We have to be careful. A lot of people talking about theories. Experience is very important, right? But, so, defects can be arrested. Maybe they're removed. But in my experience, I've had a lot of defects that have been arrested. And they all become situational. Different situations in life bring back defects. Some situations in life bring defects I never ever had, right? I wrote on a 6-step, I wrote about the defect, but I don't really suffer from that defect. I never have, right? So those kind of things can come and go. So it's a lifelong process. And for me, recovery's been a long, slow process, right? So at the age of 16, I ran away from home. And I grew up in a lot of violence and a lot of people used drugs in my house. It was that kind of a house. There was a lot of crime, there was a lot of violence, there was a lot of different kinds of things. I was raised not to trust the police. I'm clean 21 years, I still don't trust the police. Yeah, I'm going to tell you something though. I'm going to tell you what's the fucking problem with that. I got a 28-year-old son, he's sitting in a rehab right now. I taught him not to trust the police. And that information is good information. The information I gave that boy was good information if you're on, the unit in jail. But it's not so great for somebody who might go to college and play baseball. You know what I mean? It was good. But, it talks about street behavior only makes sense in the street, right? And that for me was a long, slow lesson. So I ran away from home when I was 16 years old, and from that point on, I was using since I was 12 years old. Before that time, before I used drugs at the age of 12 years old, I had very similar problems to the ones that have plagued me all these years. It was undiagnosed though. Nobody knew what it was. They tried a lot of different things to help me. They were trying to help me. They tried, they had professionals that would talk to me to try to help me. And I hated every one of them. Couldn't stand them, right? I resented them. Like, you have no way of understanding what's going on in my house right now. You don't know what's going to happen when I go home tonight, right? So I ended up in all these institutions as a juvenile, home for runaways and juvenile institutions. I ended up, it's weird because I never knew what happened to me. I always knew that at like around 17, I was just off on my own. And I never understood how that happened. Like, I thought maybe I had been emancipated or something, but there was never a court hearing. And recently my sister found documents in my father's stuff where the caseworker wrote to my father and said, Billy wants to be discharged to this auto body shop. So he's going to learn how to fix cars. As long as you're not opposed, we're going to do that. This is a different time in life, right? I mean, this wouldn't even happen today. It was a fucking chop shop. It was. It was. I never used any Bondo or nothing. I never painted nothing. Nope, we just took shit apart. That's it. And sometimes we cut it apart. And these guys I got involved with at that time were legitimate guys. They were real, they were really involved with this stuff. So that's where my life went. And then, I just kind of lived like that. And before that period of time, though, I hated myself when I was 6 years old. At 6 years old, I didn't believe I could ever be anything, right? I couldn't, I had no self-esteem. I felt that everybody around me was better than me, smarter than me, better looking than me. Other boys were better at sports than me. Like, no matter what I did, I didn't really have much faith in myself. I didn't really want to. The only peace I got in my life as a child was when I read a book. Books are like drugs in a sense because they take you somewhere, right? And you could be in a fucking apartment building in Trenton, New Jersey with cockroaches crawling all over the place and people screaming and fighting, and you could be reading a book and be in a whole nother place, and that's what I used to do, right? And, but when I used drugs that day for the first time, something happened in me that gave me something that I never had before. And that's the thing about drugs is they work really fucking good. They just don't work that good for too long. Drugs work really, really well, but the side effects are brutal, right? The side effects are brutal. And so, I used like that for many, many years, and I justified it, and I started going to institutions, then I started going to adult institutions, and, I'm not a big-time criminal. I'm pretty much, the Forrest Gump of the criminal world. Just whatever I kind of bumped into along the way. Like, I would go out, I would go drinking, and I would walk home, and I'd wake up. I lived in a room above a bar for about 15 years. And I would wake up in the morning, and there'd be a lawnmower and a set of golf clubs in the fucking room, you couldn't even get out of bed. Stuff like that, right? And we called that life on the installment plan, right? You do 9 months, 6 months, 2 years, 18 months. Can't do parole. Always get violated on parole, right? In and out, in and out, in and out. You got a sentence. It took me, the last time, I'll just jump to the front of the line here. The last time I did a burglary. I burglarized my boss. I used to do tree work. And I was, by that point I had progressed. When I was smoking weed, drinking, and all that stuff, I didn't think I really had an issue. There wasn't an issue. I thought my issues had to do with people not liking me, the police bothering me, girls being, too demanding, my father being square. I could go through the whole list, right? But the last time, I started using other drugs, right? Certain drugs, when you use them, may become very apparent that this is a fucking issue, right? Like, I was 17, I smoked crack for 6 months one time. And that made me a little uptight, Right? So anyway, I get strung out, I'm shooting dope. I go to work and I decide that I just got paid, I had some drugs, but the problem is tomorrow, right? The problem is always tomorrow, right? At the end of my using, there was no peace for me. There was no amount of drugs. There was no lick I could sting where I could sit in my house comfortable and say, okay. It wasn't like that. It was always about what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So I stole a bunch of tools, chainsaws, hedge trimmers, blah, 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 hid them in the bushes. Cops, the neighbors called the police when they saw us out there in the middle of the night collecting the shit, went to jail. Went to jail on the 4th of July, which is not a good time to go to jail on the 4th of July Friday, because you won't see the judge till Monday at least. But anyway, I called my father. My father loved me very much. Both my parents loved me very much. My father was real straight. My mother was at the opposite end of the spectrum. I called my father right before that, and he said to me, Billy, your voice sounds funny. Are you back on that stuff again? I said, well, I have a cold. Always with an answer, right? And he said, okay. And then 2 weeks later, I was in jail, and I called him collect. You know how that goes, right? You have a collect call from Lehigh County Prison. Press 1 to accept the charges. He accepts the charges. And he says, well, it seems like your cold's all cleared up. And then he said, these phone calls are getting expensive. Write a fucking letter. And he hung up the phone, right? I want to tell you something funny about that, too, because, you know, I learned the most about the steps, really, from my son, my mother, my father, from those relationships, right? Even my ex. Because that's why I had to learn to start practicing the principles of the program in my life, early on, right? So I wasn't allowed to see my son early on. Early on, I wanted to see my son so bad. I wanted to see my son. The truth of the matter is that he was born. I went to the hospital the day he was born, October 13th, 1996. I went to the hospital. I held him. The nurse. I had 1 day clean. Because I knew he was coming, and I wanted to be clean. Right? I didn't know about Narcotics Anonymous or nothing like that. But so I went to a detox. I went to the hospital. I was already feeling a little, you know that feeling. I held the baby. The nurse said, you can come back tomorrow and hold the baby again. I left the hospital, and I went to cop, and I was fucking crying. Because I knew. I wasn't under the illusion of I was going to do one. I knew what happened, right? I knew what happened. I went from a place where I was using for weeks, and it was still sort of okay, to a place where one bag and I would wake up sick somehow, right? Like something changed in the chemistry of my body and my brain, or whatever the fuck went on, but I just knew what was going to be, and I went and I copped, and I didn't see him again for 3 years. And then when I got clean, I started reaching out and asking, can I see him? And she would say, this is what you should do. I talk about learning to practice the steps. I'd say, hey, can I see Cameron? And she would say, I don't think it's a good time yet. Now, I would say, I fucking hate your guts, you stupid bitch, right? And I would fucking curse her out. I would call her names, right? And I would call my sponsor. I felt like I had done the right thing, right? Right? Who the fuck is she? Clean for 3 weeks now. You know what I mean? And my sponsor would say, well, look, call her next week. If she says no, just say thank you and hang up the phone. And I'll be like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. But you're laughing already, right? Yeah. Because it went on and on and on. And it didn't stop until one day I did it. Called her all kinds of names. And I hung up the phone and I heard a little voice say, how long are you going to do this for? I didn't stop calling her names because it was wrong. I stopped calling her names because it was starting to bother me doing it. I never stopped doing anything for anyone else. And I haven't been able to stop a whole lot of things for myself. But the ones that I did, it had to do with how it affected my spirit. So in those kind of moments, right, I have a choice of changing or going back to the way I was. So I started calling, and when she would say no, I would say okay. And I would call other people and tell them how much I hated her, but I wouldn't tell her. Right? And one day she said okay. And just a little caveat here. One time, it was New Year's Eve, I had less than a year clean, and I got myself a new pair of sneakers, and I had a new outfit, and it was a dance, NA dance, high class, right? And I'm ready, right? I'm going, and I know that everyone's gonna see what I'm wearing. Just to give you a little dateline, it was I think a pair of Fat Farm jeans and a Nietzsche T-shirt, right? I don't even know if they make them anymore, but that was high class at the time. So anyway, she calls me as I'm fixing my hair. She calls and she says, "I need you to take Cameron." And I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, I'm going out with my husband, and I need you to take Cameron." And I go, "I'm not taking him so you can go out and drink, right?" And boom, whatever. So I get to the dance, I see my sponsor, and I'm feeling very proud of myself, like, right? And I say to him, she called me and wanted me to take him so she could go out drinking. Can you believe that? And he goes, "So you're telling me that you prayed for God to put your son in your life, and now you want to question how he does it?" And I said, well. So what I did was, after that, I never said no for any reason. I took him anytime he was offered to me, and we became a tradition that he came with me every New Year's Eve. Because he was with us. Because that's what I did on New Year's Eve. And he was actually raised in the program, And anyway, he's in treatment right now, and I hope that things are going to work out for him. Seems like things are going better, but it's hard to have peace when your children are in trouble, right? But if you don't know why you need the steps in your life, have a motherfucking kid. That's right. Or be in anything. I mean, there's a million reasons why, but for me, that was the big catalyst. And my mother. So I'm going to talk about my mother. I want to talk about my mother because she died 3 weeks ago. Yeah, and do me a favor. I love all you guys. Please don't nobody fucking come up to me after this. I don't really like even talking about it too much, but I'm going to talk about it because it shaped my whole life, and it shaped my life today, and it has a lot to do with my journey through the steps. But people in NA, they love you, they mean well, but they don't know what to say, and then they say stuff. When you don't know what to say. And so I can't tell you, and I just keep reminding myself, they love me, they love you, but I can't tell you how many times I had to sit and listen to somebody in the past few weeks tell me how hurt they are that my mother died. Right? And then the second thing is they'll go through the whole fucking list of everybody who ever died in their family. And I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I want to move on with the conversation. I want to go to work. I want to talk about the steps. I want to tell some jokes. I even feel guilty being happy right now. You understand what I'm saying? I wake up sometimes, I feel okay, and I feel like I'm not supposed to really feel okay, right? But anyway, I hated my mother for most of my life. I ran away from her home. I didn't speak to her for 8 years. All right? And the blessing was, well, my son again comes into play because I said to my son one day, we were talking about something. I was always very close to my father. My father always chased me. My mother wouldn't chase me. Now, my mother and father both loved me very much, but one of the differences is my father's from another generation. Like Elvis, Frankie Valli, and the Four Seasons, follow the rules of the world and you'll get far. My mother's younger. She's from the hippie generation, right? My father always looked at me like, what the fuck is wrong with this kid? And my mother always looked at me like, look how beautiful this kid is, like a piece of art. Yeah? Before she died, I was able to take her to see Carlos Santana and Billy Strings in Atlantic City. She got all fucked up on weed gummies, but that's her problem, not mine. She had terminal cancer, okay? But anyway, but she was doing weed long before the cancer. So I don't fucking know. But I ran away. I didn't speak to her. I would talk to her every once in a while. Actually, my uncle, who God rest his soul, he tricked me into being in a room with her one time. That's how I started talking to her again after 8 years. I hated her. I blamed her for everything. We were real poor. And there was a lot of violence. And there was a lot of violence from people that she brought into our lives, men, right? So not only was I resentful that these dudes would beat me the way they did, but I was also resentful that they got my mother's attention, right? So all this stuff comes out in the step work, right? In my mind, with the resentment, it's very short and sweet and simple, right? There's no plausibility. There's no reasoning. There's no looking at her side. There's none of that, right? It's just me, right? Self-centeredness, right? But anyway, I said to my son something about grandpa, and he says, how come every time you talk about your dad, you say grandpa, but every time you talk about your mom, you say my mom? And I go, well, I don't know. I go, well, I guess maybe she hasn't been that much of a grandmother to you. And he said, well, maybe you never let her. Out of the mouths of babes, right? So at that point, I decided to start, acting as if. I was acting as if I cared about my mother. I felt repulsed by her. I didn't like it when she hugged me. But I would call her. I would talk about things, and I would go see her. Things like that. And so that went on for some years, right? And then I went over her house one day, acting as if, and she told me she had cancer. And I was like, wow, holy crap, right? And then, I don't even know how I felt about it, right? Like I felt bad, but I don't know how I felt 100%. But anyway, 2 weeks later, maybe a month later, I get a phone call. She's in the morning, she's hysterically crying. Her husband, she woke up and her husband was sitting dead on the couch. Now, my mother's never driven. Never drove. Her sister died in a car accident in the early 70s, and she never drove after that. So as soon as that happened, I went over there, and the family was there and stuff like that, and I was looking around, and I realized, I'm going to have to step in here. Like, I'm going to have to help take care of my mother, right? So at that point in time, I'm still not really liking her all that much. Still blaming her for a lot of things, right? But one of the things I did do before that was a nice step with her. That's when things started to change, right? When I look at those relationships, the 8th step, first it starts in the 8th step. So in the 8th step, I'm writing my list, and I got my mother, and I'm thinking, like, I don't even know why I owe her amends. She owes me amends, right? Anybody know that feeling? And my son, we got in an argument because he was using, and he left, and he went to his mother's house, and he didn't talk to me for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I was losing my mind that the boy wasn't talking to me, and I'm writing about my mother, and I remember I didn't talk to her for 8 years. How must she have felt with me not talking to her for 8 years, right? So then eventually I got to a place where I could do a 9th step with her. And, the thing about the 9th step that's, I think, for me was really important was allowing the person to talk to me about how they felt about what had gone on. Because when I sat there with my mother and I said, well, Mom, this is what we're doing. We're in a car, right? And I drove her home from a family function. So we were never really alone much. She was like the matriarch of our family. We finally were alone, and I said, they have this thing where you list people that you harmed, and then you got to make amends to them. And she goes, oh, that's nice, she says. I said, yeah, well, you're on that list. And she goes, well, I don't know why. You only hurt yourself, Billy. And I said, that's what I was thinking. But, and this I did not write, okay? I did not write what I'm about to say here, all right? This just came in the process. I said, well, what if we just say that I was always mean to you and I always blamed you after Dad left? And she said, well, that's true. And that broke me, started to cry. And then we talked about her life for a little while. We talked about a bunch of things. And that really started to, that softened my heart. And that changed things. And I didn't know what was going to happen, that she was going to get sick. But that's what happened. And it was my responsibility as her son. And I just have spent the last 2 years driving there. She lived about an hour from me. She lived in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And every Wednesday or Thursday, I would drive to her house. I would take out the trash. I used to take her grocery shopping, but then she couldn't go out anymore, so I started doing the grocery shopping. Yeah, it's tough doing other people's grocery. Y'all know where this shit is in the store that she wants. You know what I mean? Fucking. weird shit, man. No. But anyway, I would go and do it, and then I would watch TV with her, and we would talk about everything, talk about everything in that time. And then the time came where she was on hospice, and I moved in with her, and I've been, there, for like a month, and she just passed. But in all that process, I got to see a lot of things I had never seen before. My truth, when I got clean, if you said to me, what do you want? What would you like? What would you like? What can we make right now? We can lock you into a contract and you can keep it for the rest of your life. What do you want? I would have said, let me stay in this recovery house. Huh? And a few pair of sneakers and a few things, right? And my sponsor always says, God has greater things in store for you than you could ever imagine. And I've found that to be true. Because I came from, listen, when I moved into that recovery house, I remember they showed me my bed. They said, here's your room. I shared a room with a guy. They said, this is your bed. And I looked, it was a bed that had no sheets on. I said, where do I get my sheets? The guy looked at me like I was crazy. He said, I don't know, I guess Target or something. And I remember thinking, like, what kind of fucking imbecile would buy sheets, right? Like, who would spend money on sheets? There's so many sheets in the world. There's always someone willing to throw you a sheet around here. You know what I mean? Why bother, spend my money? I got other things to do with my money. And it ain't sheets. I have a towel. So apparently you can see my success in life. When you be using that one towel, that motherfucker starts to stink a while. Woo! Anyway, I would have been cool with all that. I would have been cool with that. I had no clue what was going to happen in my life, right? I had no faith in myself. The only thing I had a little faith in was Narcotics Anonymous. When I walked into that room, and the people that there, they welcomed me, and I felt something there I'd never felt before. It was something I was searching for my whole life. You know what I mean? It was something that I looked for in drugs. It's something I looked in multiple groups of people. And we talk about, and I like I said, I'm skipping around. Like I was thinking I should try to cover the 12 steps, and I hope I'll do that. But I sort of have it just kind of jumps around, right? But I never had a problem with stopping using drugs. Never had a problem with that. I'll stop every day. Every day. I run out of drugs every single day. I get robbed every single day. I get thrown in a cop car or an ambulance every single day. Like one of those things goes on every single day that ends my using for the day. At the end of my using, there was no amount of drugs that I could have where I would have some peace in my life. I felt literally like I was being chased by a pack of wild dogs, and that I was just keeping this far ahead of them. They're nipping at my heels. That's how my using was. That's how it felt. No peace whatsoever. And so, I thought the drugs were the problem so many times. This is a common misconception, right? The drugs are the problem. The drugs, the drugs, the drugs. I never was able to really see all the insanity that existed before the drugs until I got further along in my recovery and in the steps, right? But the one thing I did realize one time was I realized something. Every time I've ever relapsed, I've relapsed a bunch of times, right? I don't know if you call it relapse because I never had a program, right? I'm here from the first time I ever came to Narcotics Anonymous. Like I'd been to Narcotics Anonymous in jail a few times, but that was because they gave you coffee. And that was because guys from other units could come to the meeting, and then there was things going on with that. But I never really, what came to Narcotics Anonymous, and the first time I did, I stayed. But what I realized was every time I would use again, let's call it that, right? Use again, because for a while I just used most of my life, and then all of a sudden I started using drugs that had me going places to get off of them, right? And that started, right? Like I'm not a junkie. I just need to go to this place, and then I'll be okay, right? And I tried the methadone clinics. And all the different things, all the different things, and it was just one disaster after another, right? And but one day when I was clean for a little while, I realized that every time I ever used drugs again when the moment came when I made the decision to get high, there was no drugs in my system. It's not the fucking drugs, is it? It's one thing. I got a fucking list. I got notebooks full of shit I did on drugs. That I can tell you I did it because I was on drugs or I did it for drugs. But those moments when I made the decision to put the drugs in my body again, there was no drugs in my system. That was my thinking, right? And so, you know, when it talks in the first step, until a second admission is made, our foundation is incomplete. It repeats this information in the 11th step, right? It says that when we surrender to the drugs, we open up this line of communication, and then a sentence later it says, when we surrender to the program, we have this communication with the higher power. I believe that's because surrender is a spiritual principle. And so my radio was tuned to another frequency, but once I surrendered, once I practiced those principles, I'm able to recognize the God of my understanding. That's when I started to see miracles. Before it wasn't miracles, it was like, I'm pretty fucking slick, you know? Like, I do a pretty good fucking job at this shit, right? And then if it was bad, it was like, you motherfuckers, man, right? Like it was your foes, the police foes, all the people. But all of a sudden, once I surrendered to the program, right? So we surrendered to the drugs. I surrendered to the drugs over and over and over again, right? I surrendered to the drugs, and 5 minutes later, pick them back up, right? But when I surrendered to the program, you know, it talks about. So I think my belief is that part in the first step there, where it starts talking about that, it starts off with reservations rob us of the benefits of recovery, right? So I think from that point on, we're at a bridge into the second step, right? We're moving into the second step. And I remember when I was writing on the second step and I asked a question, it says, you know, have you talked to other addicts about their experience? So I called my grand sponsor at the time. He died clean, God rest his soul. And I said to him what I was writing, the question, and he said to me, people have said certain things to me along the way. Have so much changed my life, right? Here's what he said. He said, this phone call is the second step, Bill. I said, well, I've been doing this for a while. I've been calling people for a while, right? He gave me something tangible, something I can hold on to, right? Same thing in the third step. In the third step, because I don't know how you guys feel, but when I've been coming through the steps, you know, I've been like thinking I'm not going to be able to get it somehow. Like, I'm going to be the one that don't fucking get this. Like, this shit is, I don't even know what the fuck this shit means. Well, that's the key. You're not supposed to really know what it means. You're just supposed to believe in it. It's not a knowledge program, right? It's a belief. It's a belief. You don't have to know how it works. If I knew how it worked, I'd probably fuck it up anyway, right? Because I would figure out a shortcut. But it says many of us could see the need for help with our drug problem, but few of us could see the need for faith and sanity, right? And this is what would happen to me and many others I know. And this is what still happens to me today. Just, I don't pick up drugs. But let's talk about, like, let's just say, like, so prayer and meditation, right? I struggle. I struggle being consistent. I struggle being consistent in the 10th step, which makes it hard to be consistent in the 11th step. But when things are going wrong in my life, I am a praying dude. I am a meditating, like, well, what we started off this conversation about me being on the beach, I was in pain. Now, I did call my sponsor one time, and I said to him, I feel like a fraud. And he said, why is that? I said, well, I started this new job. It's very stressful. So I leave every morning early. I get there 10 minutes early. I meditate. I pray. I said, but that's not really how I am all the time. I'm doing it because I need the help right now. And he said to me, well, that sounds like a healthy way to deal with fucked up situations, Bill. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. How did I used to deal with situations, right? I used to destroy my life. You know, one of the biggest problems I've had in my time in Narcotics Anonymous has been comparing myself to other people. Every time I compare myself to other people, I fall short. And you'll hear all kinds of shit. And I hear people talk about like they got a direct fucking line to God in heaven that they can tap into anytime they want. And maybe they do. That ain't my business, but I don't. So I feel like I'm coming up a little short sometimes with my relationship. But then when I stop and look at the relationship I had since I was been alive up until today, I realize how beautiful it is, right? And how great it is and how much it's changed my life. Love people, trust God, right? That's my only job. Love people, trust God. The problem is the defects, right? The defects. And, a four-step, my whole four-step was about my mother. All my resentments were about my mother. I never really saw so my mother had this boyfriend, his name was Randy. I hope he's dead. He terrorized me. He terrorized me. He terrorized me. I'm not fucking kidding. Literally, he fucking beat me constantly. He followed me around the house. He made my life miserable. He also beat my mother. And I hated my mother for why were we living with this motherfucker, right? Now, a month ago, my sister's talking to me. My sister remembers things I don't remember. She says to me, "You remember that night we were on the train because we were homeless?" I said, "I don't remember that." "We were on the train homeless?" She said, "Yeah, we got kicked out of our apartment. Mom took us on the train and we spent the whole night on the train." She said, "I remember being very scared." My sister's 2 years younger than me. I would have been about 7 maybe. I blocked it out. There's a lot of things I've found, in my writing. I'm good. I got a bottle of water. I appreciate that. Thanks for reminding me to take a drink. So I was thinking, damn, we were homeless for a night? I started thinking how that must have started to bother out. Can you imagine being on a train with 2 little kids? Nowhere to go? And I said to her, "Where did we go?" She said, "We went to Randy Dickerson's." And I said, "Holy fuck." So I've hated my mother all these years for exposing me to this guy. And in this moment, I realized, and this is right before her death too, that she subjected her baby and herself to this abuse to have shelter for her children. I didn't understand that. I couldn't see that side of things. And even if my sister would have talked about this with me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to see what I saw going through the experience of the steps, the amends process, and the living amends process. Because, it seems like you do a 9 step and then you're good, right? I mean, me and Mom were pretty good after that, but I didn't even know what that 9 step was going to entail. Matter of fact, she being deceased, it might not even be over, because I've always been distant from my sister, right? I hit the road early on, right? I never really was in her life. She lived in Texas for the past 20 years. I've never been there. I met my niece twice. I'm very self-centered. I do a lot of travel and running around, but I don't know. I think there's some stuff to do there, but I'll tell you one thing, I never did a 9 step with my sister. It's one of the things I've been talking to my sponsor about. So what I'm saying to you is that my father's dead, my mother's dead, and it's me and my sister. And I knew my mother wanted me to make sure that I take care of my sister. So the 9th step is not done yet with Mom, right? You know what she said to me when she was dying? You know what she said? She said, "Make sure you call your sponsor. And don't ever go back." She would come to my celebrations. My cousin Jerry got like 8 years. We grew up together. I'll tell you, this is the kind of family. We were in a store. His father was like a Randy. He terrorized the motherfucking neighborhood. He was like 6'6", half Cherokee Indian, mean as fuck. Never worked a day in his life, right? Yeah. Nobody could fuck with us in the neighborhood, but he fucked with us bad, right? We're in the store. Jerry sees a water pistol. He wants the water pistol. Father said, "You ain't getting that." And you guys know this move? You hold the toy all through the store until you hit the register. When you hit the register with one last prayer, you try it. See, maybe you might get it, right? You got a 50-50 shot. His father turns and looks at him and says, "You got a million chances to stick that in your pants. You ain't fucking getting it." That's the mentality. That's the mentality that we come up with. That's what we come up with, right? But anyway, so, he's, my cousin now, he lives, so the odd thing is that I ran away from home, 36 years ago or whatever it is, and here I am, right back where I started from, because I had to go home, take care of my mom, right? She was on hospice, I cared for her last days, I did what I was supposed to do, and, but I'm riding around, and I'm seeing all the roads. I'm seeing the roads that we walked on. My mother used to hitchhike with 2 kids. You don't see it too much anymore, but back then it was a little bit more, common. But and it used to make me mad. I can remember walking down 611, like cursing, like in my mind, little boy. I was so angry as such a little boy. I'd be like, I don't know why all my friends' parents have cars. You know what I mean? Like, why we have to fucking live like this? And now I think about it another way. Like I think about what does it feel like to be a woman, having to get somewhere, and have to be on the road hitchhiking with 2 children? So, the steps and the whole process of getting to know her and know her side of things gave me that ability, right? And, the other thing was, the resentment, has, like, invaded my life constantly, right? Anything that reminded me of anything would have me acting crazy, right? People don't know why, right? When we have unresolved issues, right? Everything can be fine, and then all of a sudden, like, you see it, right? You see people like, like, what the fuck just happened to him? I have no clue. It's unresolved, right? Oh shit, it's unresolved. And the process of the steps. Now, listen, a 4-step for me did not resolve too much. It cataloged it. It cataloged it. An inventory. What's an inventory, right? What's an inventory in a store? Well, we have this much of this. We have that much of that. We don't sell this anymore. We shouldn't order any more of this. Let's get rid of this. We sell a lot of it. We need a lot of this right now, right? We're short on this. Let's get this, right? But when I looked at my life before a 4-step, what I saw, when I would tell you about it, this happened to me, and then when I was this old, this happened to me, and then this happened to me, and then this happened to me. And so it was a whole series of isolated incidents, usually with me getting fucked over somehow. And then, after a 4-step, and it's all in one place, you start to see the common denominator. Little Billy. Me, right? And me making the same decisions over and over again. And but I want to tell you, and so like with all that resentment with my mother, when I finished writing on the 4-step, and when I went over my 4-step with my sponsor, when we did a 5th step, some of those things that made so much sense in my head, to read them out loud, I felt foolish. Like it didn't. I didn't need nobody to tell me that this don't jive, right? When it reached the air, it didn't jive. But in my head, it was completely justifiable. And I ran on it for most of my life. But guess what? I still felt that way. I still felt it. I knew it was wrong. I knew it didn't make sense. It wasn't logical. It wasn't right. But that's how I felt. And it still drove me. It still dictated how I behaved. And how I interacted with people. And that's the problem with defects, is they make relationships hard, right? Defects make relationships hard. In the 3rd step, it says, this is when, like I said, I always have connected with something in a step to help me to, I don't want to use the word understand, but let's say believe I could go on, that I might be able to do it. And it said, all we have to do is believe there's a force that can help us to become more patient, tolerant, and useful in helping others. And I thought, well, that makes sense to me, because everyone I try to help ends up telling me to go fuck myself at some point. Because I mean well, but, like my defects come into play, and all of a sudden I'm causing harm, right? Over and over and over again. So I started to believe that could be, and that's for me where the 6th and 7th step come into play. And for me, I think about the 6th and 7th step like I think about the 2nd and 3rd step, right? The 6th step for me is a restoration to sanity. Why is it that? Because I can finally see what these defects are doing to my life and the people I love. Because I don't see it, right? I don't see it. I can constantly blame people, places, and things for the things that go wrong. But when I'm in the process of the 6th step, and it talks about in the 6th step, it talks about us trying to control our defects, right? And I remember hearing people sharing meetings about trying to control their defects. And I remember thinking, well, I just won't do that. I'm not gonna try and control it. That was, I think that's part of the natural process. My son, I remember, so many times I was 100% right and having to apologize at the end of the night because of the way I behaved, right? So my son would be getting in trouble in school, and I'd be driving home. He had a real attitude problem, in his teenage years. I don't know where he got that from, but I'd be driving home and I'd be talking to myself like, all right, no matter what he says, no matter what he does, don't say anything, don't explode, right? Because I'm like a big child, right? When I would get angry, I would just go ballistic, right? Like, I met everything with brute force, right? Somewhere along the line, I learned that I could meet everything with brute force and it would back up, right? Most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. And I would go home and, I would talk to him and he would give me an attitude problem. It's hard to take attitude from somebody who you pay for everything for. You know what I mean? It's tough, right? You tell me I'm paying for a cell phone and you ain't calling me the fuck back, bro, we got a fucking problem, right? I would say, how was school today? He'd go, I go, well, did you go to school? That was a 50-50 shot too, right? So anyway, I would get mad and I would explode and, throw shit, break shit, and, terrorize him, I didn't physically put my hands on him, but I made it a rough environment regardless, and where I would find myself having to apologize to the guy who was in trouble at school today because of the way I dealt with it, right? And when we talk about, one thing that we don't really talk about too much is like etiquette and Narcotics Anonymous and how we share and what we share and all that kind of stuff. You think about the 10th tradition where it talks about, I believe it's 10th tradition, it says we have a disease that affects every area of our life, right? So what is sharing material in Narcotics Anonymous when you have a disease what's an outside issue? You have a disease that affects every area of your life. And that's what it is, what I was just talking about. It's not what your wife or your husband did, it's what was your reaction to what your wife or your husband did. How do you behave in these situations? How did I behave? Yeah, was my son wrong? Fucking ain't right, he was wrong, right? But how did I react to that? That's what we want to hear, right? And that's what we need to talk about. And that's not easy to get to. I remember, so my sponsor, I called him on the phone. I started bitching about the guys in the recovery house, bitching about child support, bitching about this. He goes, I'll tell you what, Bill, you got 10 seconds to start talking about yourself or I'm hanging up the phone. I started crying. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to talk about myself. What are you talking about? But that's where it started for me, It started with making my bed. My sponsor told me to make my bed. He said, in the recovery house, he came to me, he said, it actually wasn't my sponsor, a guy became my sponsor later on. He goes, Big Bill, that's what they call me. Big Bill, you gotta make your bed. I go, I ain't making my fucking bed. Non-existent virtues here we're talking about, right? Because in the jailhouse, they start doing this thing where they won't crack your door. All right, 10 minutes, is that what you're telling me? 10 minutes, all right. In the jailhouse, they wouldn't crack your door if you didn't make your bed. In the rehab, you couldn't do shit if you didn't make your bed. Now I'm free, right? I ain't making my fucking bed. He said, well, call your sponsor, and if he says you don't have to make your bed, you won't have to make your bed. Well, I wasn't calling that guy. Not with that bullshit. So I grudgingly decided to make my bed, but I was struggling with praying every morning, so I came up with this little combo move, right? Where I throw the blanket and go down on my knees and pray. You know what happened? I started to get out of the shower some days. If my bed wasn't made, I would know I forgot to pray. So with that, I started to pray. Now, here's what's important. Don't make your bed if you don't want to make your bed. I don't give a fuck what you do at the end of the day, but at least clean your sheets. But listen, what I realize now is 20 years later, 21 years later, I cannot walk out of my bedroom with the bed unmade. Like, I get up and I gotta piss and I need coffee and I got 3 cats that are screaming for food. And sometimes I'll think, let me just run to the bathroom and I'll come back and make the bed. It bothers me to walk out of the room. Because, I heard people say it before, like, the man makes the habit makes the man. Well, making your bed keep you clean? No. There's a lot of other stuff. But it's like spokes in a wheel, like a bicycle wheel, right? What happens if you lose a spoke? Is the wheel going to collapse? Is it compromised? Probably not, maybe not. But how many spokes can you lose? And then all of a sudden and then it's going to collapse, right? So that's like all the different things in the program. Service work, right? Service is the only thing that's giving me any lasting peace, right? All the things that I like to do to fill the hole inside of me don't last. Matter of fact, most of them only feel good in making the decision to do them, right? Like, the actual doing of them ain't that good. But the say, fuck it, that's like, woo, you know what I mean? Like, because the noise stops for a minute, right? And then after that, it's all like, fuck, right? But service, they used to, I don't know if you guys do this around, but they used to be like, hey, we're going to go help Jimmy B move. You know, fucking help somebody move. Fucking, I don't want to move. They say, you want to stay clean? They always get you with that, don't they? You want to stay clean. You can't say no, right? So you go help them move. But when I went to move, I met Ralphie C, Jose C, and two other guys. And I've been friends with them for 21 years. And we talked and we laughed and we did all this stuff. And when I went home, right, I was vibrating inside. And when I woke up the next day, I missed them. You know, this is what happens when I interact with you guys like this, right? I'll be thinking about some of you guys. You know what I mean? It'll come into my mind, right? I was at ROR 2 years ago. And I was looking forward to coming here and seeing some of those people because of the way everybody treated me so great and had such a good time, right? This convention is beautiful. Everybody here is beautiful, right? Narcotics Anonymous, no matter where I've went, you know, has always welcomed me. I'll tell you, they announced our clean time in the meeting. So they'll say, you know, a list of people who clean time is coming up. I swear to God, now I might be crazy. But when they say Bill S. and the date and the years, I feel like everybody claps a little bit louder than they do for everybody else. Now, I might be wrong, but that's not how I felt all over the world, all over my life. I felt like everybody wanted me gone, right? I got involved in service because I didn't have no money to put in the basket. I figured if I could help out, maybe they'll let me stay. I didn't know I was doing the very thing that I needed to do in order to help me to get away from my self-centeredness for a hot minute. That my survival was necessary on the amount of service I was willing to do. So I believe in the program, I believe in sponsorship, I believe in home group. You know what I mean? I believe that God has in store for me more. You know, I'm now living where I ran from, and I'm happy there. I'm pretty happy right there. You know what I mean? A lot of things changed in a short period of time. My job changed. A whole bunch of things changed. I didn't try and change anything. They were just things that came up. I needed to go and help my mother, and then some other opportunities were offered to me that I would have never took if I wasn't going to live with my mother, that bettered my life. And that's what I believe, you know, is the difference between my will and God's will. Is God's will does not require, it does require some effort on my part, but it doesn't require any manipulation. And it just sort of comes together for me, and now here I am here. And I'm grateful to be here, and I appreciate you asking me to share, and that's all I got. Thanks for listening.
All right, let's give Bill another round of applause.